All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys on a bit of an awesome Monday evening in America. So we got a fun show. The Kraken has been released, and then it has immediately lost. So we will explain to you how the Kraken got clowned, the clown Kraken. Oh, that's got a nice ring to it. That's later in the program. Good news for progressives. That doesn't happen often. It's on the show today. We'll explain, almost no one else is. And then Democratic leadership, as usual. The serial bunglers are back. We have that later in the program as well. By the way, this week, not a big deal. Our 15th year anniversary / birthday, not a big deal. We're the oldest show in internet history. Now, every time I say it, I feel like that's the coolest thing ever. Okay, and brought to you guys by you guys. So let's keep it going. We have less than a month in our fundraising drive. Let's finish super strong. We've been trying to get to 2 million all year long. We're kind of almost there, as I'm about to show you, tyt.com/go. Now, would a hero give $15 for our 15th birthday? I guess. How about $127 gets you a press on t-shirt, but $150 makes it round. $1,000 gets you the sweatshirt, the hoodie, and on the donor wall, but $1,500 is a little rounder. Not really, $1,000 is actually literally rounder. Anyways, I love you guys, tyt.com/go. Speaking of which, Casper, go.
All right. Donald Trump held his first rally in Georgia following his pretty devastating loss to Joe Biden in the general election. And in order to cope with the fact that he lost his reelection, he took a hit of that sweet, sweet copium and passed it on to his supporters. Take a look.
The poll book is completely off.
Who was it called by? Oh my goodness, all the networks.
Dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.
Special thanks to Brett Ehrlich for making that brand new bumper for our show. And for those of you who might not know what copium is, it's basically a word referring to all the pretty little lies Trump supporters and Trump himself tell themselves in order to cope with the fact that they've lost. And so what is the story about? What did Trump do during this rally? Well, it's interesting because Republicans who have positioned themselves as this party of personal responsibility while pointing fingers at the left as so-called oppression Olympics participants seem to really like to victimize themselves. And that's exactly what happened in Georgia. Let's take a look.
And you know what they're saying? They're saying, we want you to fix the system. We're going to fix the system. But the system will be fixed when these people get in. They'll get in and we'll fix the system. Because we're all victims. Everybody here, all these thousands of people here tonight, they're all victims, every one of you.
So there you have it. Donald Trump expressing his self-perception of victimhood, arguing that Republican voters are victims because he keeps lying about so-called widespread voter fraud. There's absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever. He can't accept the fact that he's lost. And so he's a victim because he's too unpopular. People didn't want to vote for him. He lost the election. And so he's a victim. His supporters are victims. Professional victimhood. That's what they're in the business of doing.
Oh, after all these decades of talking about, the liberals just want to be victims. They just want to live in victimhood. Now all of a sudden, Niagara Falls got nothing on Trump's tears. Oh, I'm the victim. You're all victims. You're all victims.
Look at that picture of him.
Victims is like the greatest rallying cry at a Republican MAGA rally of all time. Oh, aren't you? Oh, white right-wingers have ruled the country for only a couple of 100 years. Now, by the way, minorities who went through slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, et cetera, not victim. No. Latinos that have been, discriminated against from day one. We try to block them in 1,000 different ways. Trump calls them rapists and criminals, not victims. I can go on and on, right? But right wingers who lost an election were victims. I love it. Keep crying, man. We're building a lake of MAGA tears.
No, it's pretty incredible because again, I mean, just think about the way the right wing has framed this entire discussion regarding victimhood, right? You're absolutely right. When it comes to actual incidents involving, let's say, unarmed people getting shot and killed, Breonna Taylor getting shot and killed in her own apartment. I mean, just the countless examples that we've given of an unjust two-tier justice system. If you talk about that, professional victims, victimhood, oppression Olympics. But when it comes to an election that Donald Trump lost fair and square, he's a victim. No, I mean, the right, it's not enough to say that what they engage in is hypocrisy. Every time they point a finger and accuse someone of something, it's typically them projecting exactly what they would do or how they would use certain talking points in order to make their case. And so I want to give you a few examples. Ann Coulter in 2009 actually wrote a book titled "Guilty: Liberal Victims and Their Assault on America." In the 1990s, Charlie Sykes wrote, "Nation of Victims: The Decay of the American Character." Oh, I love it so much. Well, what happened to the decay of the American character that we're experiencing right now under the Trump administration? And of course, how can I leave out my favorite group of people, the intellectual dark web? Here you go.
Victimhood has become almost a mental plague upon Black America in particular, because that word racism is being so overused that society is becoming desensitized to it. And we actually can't even recognize it when it actually exists. We think everything is racist.
We mentioned the oppression Olympics before. Can you explain why this competing set of oppressions, or I don't even think they're real oppressions, I think they're perceived oppressions, why this is actually something that can't hold?
There's a Democrat and media complex that all too often rewards this. It is a kind of a grievance culture. I mean, Generation G, we hear about Generation Y and X, but gosh, there's a lot of grievance out there that's kind of unprovable, the underlying allegations.
You probably think you're an individual with unique experiences, thoughts, and ambitions. Well, I hate to break it to you, you're wrong. America is a terrible place. What is surprising and disturbing is that so many people actually go along with it. Get it? Good, because it's about to get even more complicated. You see, all women are oppressed by the patriarchy, and all gays are oppressed by the heterosexual majority. 30 or 40 years ago, activists encouraged racial solidarity among blacks to combat oppression. But today, that's not enough. They're so united that it doesn't matter. Why shouldn't these victim groups get together and form a political coalition unified by the belief that the majority society has harmed them?
This is what intersectionality is all about. The idea behind intersectionality being that if you take all of these groups, you can kind of put them together like a transformer or something, and that they will become something stronger. But actually what's been proven in everything that's happening in society right now is that they're becoming weaker. They're actually in a sort of oppression Olympics.
Now people are crying and making videos and pleading on Facebook to say, look what I experienced today.
Are people crying every day, Candace Owens? Kind of like the president that you support. Isn't he crying every day?
Okay. I love this. Oppression Olympics. It's Generation G. Okay. For grievances. Are you kidding me? You guys are, that's what Laura Ingraham called it. You guys are a living, breathing, walking Festivus celebration. Okay, all you've got is grievances. But we lost Georgia. But then we lost Arizona. Hugo Chavez did it. And it was a communist Chinese. I have grievances. I have grievances against ghosts. I have grievances against the people who voted against. I have grievances against Republicans in Georgia who didn't cheat enough. I have grievances. And then the Ben Shapiro one is, they've got a victim mentality when the majority of society doesn't agree with them. Oops, I believe the majority of society is decided by elections. And we just said, we're not interested in you. We don't want you. We want the other guy. I'm a victim. You're all whiny little, you know what they are. Okay, so just last thing here, guys. Look, to give you a juxtaposition, Henry Louis Gates is a Harvard law professor, and cops arrested him on his own porch for no reason at all. They're like, black man tried to break into the house. He's like, not breaking in. This is a key. This is my house. I can show you my picture inside the house. They're like, you're under arrest. When Obama supported him just a tiny bit, he says in his recent book, he lost more support among white voters in America than any other thing he did. For justifiably saying, hey, wait, maybe you shouldn't arrest a Harvard law professor in his own house because he's black. So, but white feelings, right-wing feelings were so hurt by that. Oh, come now, we don't get to arrest black people in their own house just because they're Harvard law professors, right? Oh, you guys are just victims. You just want to be victims. On the other hand, in this case, they've lost nearly 50 court decisions in a row. They have no evidence, nothing to actually complain about. Yeah, but Hugo Chavez and Kraken, man. Good. I love to see it. I love to see it. Guys, thank you for providing me with a redemption and for 2020. At the very end of the year, just this delicious, delicious tears. I didn't expect this wonderful an ending. Thank you.
It is pretty tasty. What's also tasty is how quickly the Trump administration has turned on William Barr, and how William Barr was actually planning on leaving the administration even before his announcement about the lack of evidence regarding voter fraud. So let's talk about that a little bit. Attorney General William Barr might be leaving the Trump White House even before Inauguration Day. And this is according to people who are close to Barr and spoke to the Wall Street Journal about this. More drama in the White House. That means that the White House continues to turn. So as the White House turns, let's do probably one of our final segments on this.
Made some very big mistakes.
I asked for his resignation.
I'm disappointed in the Attorney General.
So in that bumper, when Trump says that he's disappointed in his attorney general, he's specifically talking about Jeff Sessions and how he recused himself from the Russia investigation. Trump is now disappointed in his current attorney general, William Barr, for refusing to go along with this sham talking point about how there was widespread election fraud. Now, of course, William Barr came out and said that there was not widespread election fraud, that the Justice Department investigation, along with the help of the FBI, failed to uncover any evidence of widespread election fraud. And of course, that led to Trump getting incredibly furious and angry with Barr. They had a contentious meeting last week as a result. However, based on what people close to the attorney general are telling the Washington Post, Barr was actually considering leaving the White House soon after the election results came in and it became clear that Joe Biden had in fact won the 2020 election. So Barr is apparently considering resigning shortly after, was considering resigning shortly after Election Day when it became clear that Biden won. But regardless of what Biden plans on doing, and I guess we'll see what happens, Trump is in fact furious with him and he can't hold back in sharing just how much disdain he has for Barr. Here's a quick clip of him talking to the press last week when he was asked if he has any confidence left in Barr. Take a look.
William Barr said he found no evidence of voter fraud on a large enough scale that could have overturned the election results. Mr. Trump says Barr isn't working hard enough to find that evidence. Yesterday, when asked if he still has confidence in Barr, the president would not give a firm answer.
Ask me that in a number of weeks from now. They should be looking at all of this fraud. This is not civil. He thought it was civil. This is not civil. This is criminal stuff. This is very bad criminal stuff.
So, Cenk, very bad criminal stuff that the Trump campaign has failed to provide any evidence of. They keep getting embarrassed in court. Later in the show, we're going to have yet another example of Sidney Powell, one of Trump's former lawyers, getting embarrassed in court by federal judges. But why don't you jump in and tell me what you think about Barr possibly leaving before Inauguration Day?
Yeah, so first of all, let's dispense with the normal political BS. He was not planning to leave before. He made it clear that he'd like to stay for the second term when Trump lost. What's the point of leaving like a week before he leaves office? There's no point at all. He did not intend that before. He's planning on leaving now because Trump and him are at each other's throats. Actually, he's not at Trump's throat. He's just like, Trump says, work harder and then you'll find evidence. He's like, but I looked at all the evidence and there isn't any. There isn't any working harder, you schmuck. Just because you don't work at all doesn't mean that like you think, well, if I worked hard, I'd probably be like halfway competent, quarter way competent. So I imagine you're not working hard. No, it has nothing to do with working hard. And you know what the reality is? Trump just wants him to cheat. He's like, why won't you cheat? Why won't you cheat? And it was this Barr at a super low bar, but I guess I'll give him credit for clearing the low bar. He did not end democracy. He did not cheat. He did not make up evidence. And how do you know who's right? If you're a rational human being, I mean, if you're a Trump zombie, there's no talking to you. But if you're not a Trump zombie, well, they went to court where in our system, I'll talk slowly for the MAGA guys, we present evidence. That's the venue in which, I'm sorry, I said venue, you don't know. That is the place where we present our evidence, if we have any, okay? Your side has lost about 48 cases in a row. Every judge, including all Trump appointed judges, have said you're embarrassing because you have no evidence at all. And you don't even know how the law works. Sidney Powell put it in her Kraken cases. The judges are like, you don't even know what you're pleading. You don't even understand what we're asking you. You're asking for remedies that don't make any sense with no evidence, and you have no idea what the law is. Oh, every one of you is deeply embarrassing. So that's a fact. That's a fact. So on the other hand, you have the Powells and the Giulianis and the Trumps saying maybe Hugo Chavez, who died 7 years ago, worked with the Republican governor of Georgia to fix an election, and I have no evidence of it. But Bill Barr, who has been supporting Donald Trump 1,000,000%, protected him during impeachment, now decided to work with Hugo Chavez instead. Gee, I wonder who's right. I can't quite tell who's right. 50-50, can't tell, right? So now the media has done a great job on it, by the way. I asked them to be clear. Now they are clear. They went in Washington Post, asked all the Republicans in Congress, and 88% of them are still supporting Trump. I can't tell who won. So no, there's a very, very clear answer for everyone who lives on planet Earth. Donald Trump is wrong. He's asking Bill Barr to break the law, and Barr is not willing to break the law. So that's why he's thinking of leaving early. And who can stand to have this moron yell at him 24/7? So I mean, it's beneath anyone's dignity. The fact that he put up with it for this long for power was sickening to begin with. It's way past time. And last thing, Trump says, ask me in a couple of weeks. Dude, in a couple of weeks, you're gonna be homeless. You owe $421 million. You're gonna get kicked out of the White House. I hope to see it literally physically happen with the Secret Service, where they just like push you out of the White House. And then you're gonna lose all your properties because you don't have money to pay it. I know you're trying to rob all of your supporters as we speak to try to pay your bills. But in a couple of weeks, you're gonna do what? You're not gonna be in charge in a couple of weeks, you moron.
Yeah, so Cenk, thanks for clarifying. I obviously wasn't clear in how I presented the story, but yeah, I mean, William Barr wanting to possibly leave the Trump White House before Inauguration Day is 100% based on his own self-interest, right? I mean, if Trump had won re-election, then he would be hunky-dory, everything's fine. Of course, he wants to serve in a second term. But once he saw that it was clear that Trump has no chance, no path to victory, there's really no reason for him to be there anymore. I mean, there's no purpose. There's no power grab available to him anymore. And then once Trump starts attacking him publicly for telling the truth about the election, that's when, I think it became clear that he's going to attempt, possibly based on what people close to him are saying, to step down prior to Inauguration Day. One other thing I wanted to mention that I thought was really interesting. So if you take a look back at the last 4 years and all the different times that Republicans went along with Trump's nonsense or lunacy, they've typically done that when they agree with the lunacy, right? They've done that when they see an opportunity for themselves to either enrich themselves or gain political power. But in certain cases, they have pushed back against Trump. Anytime Trump wants to possibly cut military spending or veto military spending if it doesn't have certain things, provisions or lack of provisions that he agrees with. Another example would be how he has tried to pull troops out of the Middle East, Afghanistan and Iraq. Republicans will check him real quick, and it makes it pretty clear how limited Trump's power is if Republicans disagree with what he's doing. And in this case, William Barr is not a dummy. Like, William Barr doesn't want a Trump dictatorship in this country because William Barr has other Republican friends who I'm sure want to run in the future. And so it's not in the Republican Party's best interest to go along with Trump's nonsense. Now, many of them have been quiet about it, as you mentioned, Cenk. Only about 2 congressional Republicans have said that Donald Trump has actually won the election, which is a flat out lie. But most of them like to keep their powder dry, or if they need to push back against Trump, they will, but only if it's based on protecting their self-interests.
Yeah, and look, last thing I'll ask the Republican voters and supporters: you loved Bill Barr just a couple of weeks ago, and when he defended Trump 110% on every single issue, and even flirting with breaking the law on those, you loved him to pieces. You defended him over and over and over again. So, like, if it happened with, let's say, Bernie Sanders and Nina Turner, I would look to see who's right, because I'd be like, oh wow, I can't believe they disagree and so harshly. Let me look at the evidence to see who's right, right? Like, do you guys have no capacity to have an open mind and go, well, I wonder if Barr is right or Trump is right? Oh, let me look at the evidence. Oh, there is none. Oh, 48 cases in a row we lost. I guess Barr is right. If you say, no, I don't have the capacity for that, I've lent my brain to Donald Trump, that's a curious person to lend it to. Well, to be fair, he does need one. But I mean, saying that Trump is right despite no evidence at all, and that the most right-wing people in the country have illegally turned against him and are working with Democrats. Why? Why would they do that? That makes no sense at all. So anyway, there's no talking to irrational people. Bill Barr's, Anna's 100% right. And I give him a little bit of credit here because I guess he could have just said, we're stealing it and hope for, a quasi-military coup. But beyond that, he was just out for power, and he's only leaving the sinking ship because, unlike other idiots, he can clearly see it sinking. So he's like, this is my cue to exit right.
Exactly. Well, when we come back from the break, we'll talk about the debates that took place between Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock. This is in regard to the runoff Senate race in Georgia. We have some great highlights from that debate for you guys, including other stories. So stick around. We'll be right back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
All right, as you guys know, we're doing some live reads, meaning your comments and programming notes during the breaks now. And we're back to a 2-hour show, so I'm super psyched about that. Let me read a whole bunch of these comments as soon as I can. As you saw in there on tyt.com/go, we're almost at 682. Can I see 682? 1.682. Paul Watson wrote it on Super Chat. As a Canadian, thank you for some rational discourse on American politics. I rely on you guys. Thank you, Paul. Ray Turner wrote in, happily donated $15 earlier to help TYT. I live in the UK, so why? Simple. TYT is the most reliable news source for me. TYT strong. I love it. Look, I was looking through your names again, and instantly, you guys are amazing. Jerry from Canada, $15. Colin, $27 from Land O'Lakes. Brian, $15 from Baltimore. Derek, $15 from Abington, Maryland. And it goes on and on. People giving 150, 100. You guys are great, 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 great. You make this change happen. I love doing the show with you guys. All right, so back to the comments. Izzy Sanchez writes in, tasty MAGA tears, yum. Let me put some on my coffee. Too strong coffee, I love it, there you go. Okay, by the way, holiday mug, not a big deal, $20. Santa's progressive and Jesus is too. You'll love it. $25 for the sampler. You get to taste both coffees at the same time. Uprising and Rebel Rose is too good a deal. I mean, it's ridiculous, too good. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. And now let me go to our members' comments on the website. Mickey C says the word racism isn't being overused. We're finally calling it out when we see it. And since we're seeing it so much, we're calling it out more. That's absolutely right. I'm writing a book now, and it's the degree to which Republicans are racist is not talked about enough, believe it or not. And I'm going to prove it in the book. Tridoria writes in, I thought conservatives hated participation trophies, and here Trump is basically asking for one. Exactly. The Mathematician says, we're back to normal show in these abnormal times with Cenk and Anna. A crumb of good news in these dark times. Love you guys. Love you right back. Thank you. And he's wondering if we could read his comments. There, we just read it. We got more time now. And by the way, tomorrow we're doing a special for you guys, Unlock the Vault. So that's going to be at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Old school TYT clips, old clips that you guys are going to love and get us in some trouble. It'll be great. So make sure you're tuning in. Start at 6 o'clock and go all the way through with all of our programming. We try to deliver for you guys because you guys are delivering for us. TYT.com/go on that. And the last one is the Georgia special. So the week after, again on Tuesday, again at 8:30 p.m. Ida Rodriguez, Benjamin Dixon, and so many others talking about that Georgia race. All right, we'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Lots of great stories to get to, including the robot Kelly Loeffler. So let's do it.
All right. Well, so the incumbent Republican, who's Kelly Loeffler, incumbent Republican Senator incumbent Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler debated Democratic challenger Raphael Warnock for the runoff race in Georgia. And first of all, let me just note that Loeffler doesn't ever seem to show any emotion or any passion. You'll see in the clips that we're about to show you. But more importantly, she dodged every single question regarding whether she stands by Donald Trump's lies about widespread voter fraud. Here's one of those examples for you.
President Trump opened his election rally last night by falsely claiming he won Georgia. He didn't. According to certified state election results, he lost the state by about 12,000 votes. Do you stand by his narrative that the election was rigged, and do you support his demand that Governor Kemp to call a special session to seek to overturn those results?
Well, first, I want to thank the Atlanta Press Club for hosting this important debate. And look, it's vitally important that Georgians trust our election process. And the president has every right to every legal recourse. And that's what's taking place. But I've called for investigations. And now there's 250 investigations open here in Georgia. But the president was also clear that Georgians need to come out and vote for David Perdue and myself because of what's at stake in this election. You know, Chuck Schumer said, now we take Georgia, then we change America. We all know what that change would be. They've been very clear. They want to raise taxes on hardworking Georgians. They want to defund the police. They want to open our borders. They want to implement the Green New Deal. I'm fighting for every single Georgian to live the American dream that I was blessed to live.
Senator, did you believe the election was rigged?
Look, Greg, it's very clear that there were issues in this election. There are 250 investigations open, including an investigation into one of my opponent's organizations, you know, for voter fraud. And we have to make sure that Georgians trust this process because of what's at stake in this election.
So of course she's trying to, straddle that line between, siding with Trump enough to avoid infuriating him and, avoiding answering the question factually, which is to acknowledge the fact that all of these investigations have gone nowhere. All of these court cases have gone nowhere. They've even been thrown out by Trump-appointed federal judges. But what she's doing there is dodging the question, which is why I appreciate the fact that the debate moderator, Greg Bluestein, made sure to follow up after she gave a non-answer. But the issue came up again, which we'll go to in just a minute. But Cenk, I wanted you to jump in.
Yeah, let me translate the answer for you guys. On the one hand, if I tell you the Georgia election is rigged, you won't come out to vote, so I will not say that. On the other hand, if I tell you it's not rigged, Donald Trump will yell at me and tell you not to vote for me. So I will not say that either. I'm a politician and a greaseball.
Totally, 100%. I mean, the thing that I love about this story is far too often we cover the news and it ends with injustice, right? It ends with the bad guy winning and you feel like there are never any consequences for the bad guys engaging in bad behavior. But in this case, the Republican Party enabling Donald Trump has essentially backed them into a corner where their political careers are really on the line. They really jeopardize their political careers by enabling Donald Trump. So there's no winning in this situation for Kelly Loeffler, which I love, which is fantastic. She has no business serving in the Senate, especially with the alleged insider trading that she engaged in, which we'll talk about in more detail in just a minute. But to watch them squirm like this is just absolutely fantastic. And we do have one more example of her squirming and dodging the question regarding voter fraud. It's in the next clip. Let's take a look.
That's my number one focus, making sure that Georgians know what's at stake. I have served Georgians every single day. It's been my honor, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Well, if everything is at stake on January 5th, that would presume that President Trump has lost. Is that what you're saying?
What's at stake is the Senate majority. This will determine who brings bills to the Senate floor. And under the Republican Senate, we've been able to deliver $3 trillion of relief to hardworking Americans hard hit by this pandemic, to the frontline workers, to hospitals, to schools. We have to continue to make sure that we open up our economy. The Democrats want to keep this locked down. They want to radically change our country. And their agent of change is radical liberal Raphael Warnock, someone that has said to reimagine police, that is endorsed by organizations whose number one goal is to defund the police. We know the direction the country would take, and we're going to continue to make sure that Georgians understand that our very way of life here in Georgia and across the country is under attack by the left.
Well, not to belabor the point, but all those things that you're warning about would not be happening, presumably, with President Trump as president. So it almost sounds as though you're conceding that that part of it has been settled, and now it's important for the Republicans to keep the majority in the Senate to have a divided government.
Can we get these moderators for presidential debates or primary debates? Like, they do I mean, based on what I've seen from this debate, they did a pretty good job asking follow-up questions. But to be clear, Loeffler is not the only Republican senator who refuses to acknowledge the reality of the outcome of the general election. In fact, the Washington Post did an analysis on all GOP lawmakers, congressional lawmakers, to see just how many of them have acknowledged the outcome, how many of them have remained silent, and how many of them have actually insisted that Donald Trump won, even though there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Just 27 congressional Republicans acknowledged Joe Biden's win over President Trump. 2 Republicans consider Trump the winner. That's Representatives Paul Gosar and Mo Brooks, because of course. And of course, despite all the evidence showing otherwise, and another 220 GOP members of the House and Senate will simply not say who won the election because they're feckless and pathetic.
Yeah, Loeffler showed up to the debate, although you could barely tell. But Perdue didn't even show up to his own debate. They just had a chair there for him because, I mean, I've never seen anyone this much of a coward. Like, I get it in primaries sometimes if the incumbent has a big lead, or in races where they're trying to not give oxygen to a candidate that's rising up, they might not show up, and that's a terrible thing to do. But at least I understand the rationale of it politically. But in a general election where it's basically 50-50 and the polling actually has you losing at this point, to not show up to a debate because the last time Ossoff slapped you around rhetorically and you looked like you were humiliated, and then you basically declare yourself a public coward by not showing up. So as robotic and awful as Loeffler was, Perdue's even worse.
Perdue is even worse. You're right. He ran away after getting absolutely annihilated in that debate with Ossoff. But since we're speaking about that annihilation, we should mention that the topic was the alleged insider trading that Perdue had engaged in after getting a Senate briefing in late January in regard to the severity of the coronavirus pandemic. And Kelly Loeffler also made some interesting trades right after that Senate briefing. And so she was asked about that. She was confronted about that, I should say, during this debate. So while debating Raphael Warnock in Georgia's runoff Senate race, Kelly Loeffler was confronted with the fact that she had made some stock trades immediately after getting some insider information in late January by the Senate in regard to the coronavirus. Let's see how that went down.
Senator Loeffler, when you received the private briefing regarding the coronavirus pandemic, you dumped millions of dollars of stock in order to protect your own investments. And then weeks later, when there came an opportunity to give ordinary Georgians an extra $600 of relief, you said you saw no need and called it counterproductive. Why do you think it's counterproductive to help ordinary Georgians in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, thank you for that question, because I've been completely exonerated. Those are lies perpetrated by the left-wing media and Democrats to distract from their radical agenda.
No, she has not been exonerated, at least not in an non-political fashion, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But for those of you who are just hearing about this, I'd love to share the details.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
of what she did immediately after that Senate briefing on the pandemic, which, by the way, immediately after that, she went on to downplay how severe coronavirus really was, putting other people's lives at risk. So on January 24th, Loeffler attended a private Senate briefing by Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. Robert Redfield about the coronavirus threat. In the 3 weeks following that meeting, Loeffler and her husband, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, Sprecher, made more than 20 stock sales amounting to between 1.25 million and 3.1 million. Loeffler also bought stock in 2 companies that produce, oh, would you look at that? Teleworking software. All of a sudden, teleworking software was on her radar. Fascinating. Once markets began plummeting in late February, the couple sold 18.7 million in shares of Intercontinental Exchange stock in 3 separate deals. They also sold shares in retail stores like Lululemon and TJ Maxx. So of course, retail stores got hit pretty hard by this pandemic. It would make sense to sell your stock in these types of companies if you know beforehand through some insider info that these companies are going to get hurt by the pandemic. And so when she says that she's been completely exonerated, understand that there hasn't been some sort of court investigation or trial or any type of real investigation into this. The Senate Ethics Committee investigated the trades that she made in June, and they alleged that there was no evidence that she broke the law. But we should probably take a look at what the Senate Ethics Committee is. It is not an independent body. It, of course, consists of senators. I want to read you the names of these senators. It includes Republican Senator James Lankford, Democratic Senator Chris Coons. You have Pat Roberts, another Republican, Brian Schatz, Democrat, James Reich, and then Janine Shaheen. So I mention this because remember, the Senate they're all like so friendly to one another. I mean, they might have some harsh talk for one another when they're doing their press conferences, but behind the scenes, they're fist bumping. And I don't believe for a second that that is a true investigation into potential insider trading, period, especially since other senators were accused of it as well.
So here's what I don't understand about MAGA guys. So on our side, progressives are on. It's not establishment Democrats, but progressives are. So I'll tell you why they quote unquote cleared her. It's because most of them are crooks. So one of the allegations was another person who did insider trading was Dianne Feinstein, who's a Democrat. So the Democrats had all the motivation to, as always, cover up for the corrupt Republicans because they had corruption on their own side. So they're like, millions of dollars of trades very specifically tailored towards this disaster before anyone else knew and the markets crashed. I don't see any evidence. I don't see anything wrong. Dianne, you're free to go. Yes. Loeffler, you're free to go. Yes. Hey, we're all free to go. Look at that. We're all crooks and we all decided to declare ourselves not guilty. So we can honestly and clearly say that. Why can't Republicans say that? Why are you guys such zombies that whenever a Republican leader says, yes, sir, absolutely, sir. Kelly Loeffler's husband is so rich, he owns the New York Stock Exchange. I'm not kidding. I didn't know you, seriously, until the Loeffler thing broke, and this is my bad. I didn't know you could own the New York Stock Exchange. So they have $500 million. Now, why is that relevant? You want to be rich, have at it, Haas. Because Loeffler literally bought that seat. She gave $2 million in bribes. I'm sorry, I meant campaign contributions to Republicans, including, by the way, Brian Kemp, who you now hate, right? And the governor of Georgia. And so she got appointed. She got appointed for giving $2 million worth of legalized bribes. And then she makes up for the money. So, you know what? I got my money's worth because now I'm a senator. I get insider information. I trade on that. I make millions more, and so does my husband. Why would you guys support that? That makes no sense. That is the very, very core of the swamp. We're willing to admit it on our side. I don't know why in the world Republicans wouldn't admit it on their side.
All right, well, we got to take a break. Let's do that. And when we come back, we have some more information on who Biden is picking for his cabinet. We have some good news, actually, and possibly a breaking news story to share with you as well. See you soon.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. So 2 quick clarifications. We had a breaking news story. For those of you watching on YouTube and Twitch, etc., we'll get you guys more of your comments in the next commercial break. And then secondly, I misspoke in the last segment. Our Georgia special, where we're going to break down what's happening in Georgia with greater details, actually next Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. John Idarola, Benjamin Dixon, Ida Rodriguez, and myself. So check that out. It's going to be great. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. We've been pretty critical of Joe Biden's cabinet picks. However, the person he has chosen to head the Department of Health and Human Services seems pretty cool. Javier Becerra is his name, and he's the current attorney general in the state of California. And what is promising about Becerra is his record on healthcare, Social Security, and his refusal to support permanent tax cuts for the wealthy. So Becerra is a supporter of Medicare for all. He's been on the record. And he also demanded during the Obama administration that he take tough action against the pharmaceutical industry in order to lower drug prices. So as recently as 2017, Becerra declared, quote, "I've been a supporter of Medicare for all for the 24 years that I was in Congress." And he said that he would fight to create such a system in California where it was considered in the legislature. As HHS secretary, Becerra would be in a position to facilitate states' waivers to make it easier for states to create Medicare for all systems. So that's definitely a positive, that's promising news. I also want to note that in 2016, he was one of the 51 House Democrats who signed a letter calling on Obama's HHS secretary at the time to use something known as march-in rights to rescind exclusive patents for medicines whose research that we, the taxpayers, actually funded through research and development grants. And so just to go back a little bit to give you more context, during the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton gave a huge gift to the pharmaceutical companies and lobbyists in 2016 when he repealed a rule requiring that those medicines be offered to consumers at a reasonable price, okay? So that did some significant damage. And the one loophole to it was this whole notion of march-in rights where the federal government can say, hey, yo, pharmaceutical company, we funded the research and development of this drug. You now cannot turn around and price gouge American citizens, right? And so Becerra really wanted the HHS secretary under Obama to implement that loophole, but of course that did not happen. Now, at the time, Becerra said this: "The failure to act in the past has undoubtedly sent an unfortunate signal that prices for federally funded inventions can be set as high as a sick or dying consumer will pay." And then one other thing that's worth mentioning this year, something more current, Becerra was one of 34 state attorneys general to sign a letter demanding that federal government use march-in rights to make the early onset COVID treatment remdesivir, whose research and development was sponsored by the government, more widely available and affordable to all. And I have other good news regarding Becerra's record. So I'll get to that in just a second. But first, Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of points here. First of all, they might be moving him out so that so he doesn't run for the Senate seat that's going to come up for when Kamala Harris becomes VP. There's been rumors in California for a long time that there was some sort of backroom deal where he was set to run for the Senate. They were going to clear the slate for him, and in California, when the Democratic Party decides to clear a slate, they do. But Health and Human Services is a great job. So putting him in a cabinet position in the middle of a pandemic like that, I'll take it. And so you never know if he's going to win the Senate seat or not. But him actually having a chance to have an effect, especially on issues that he has been great about in the past, that's a big win. So Javier Becerra is not known as a big progressive, but his actions have actually shown on critical issues, especially the issue of healthcare, that he has acted like one. And so, great, that's wonderful. So sometimes reporters, corporate Democrats, and sometimes even the audience has trouble understanding where progressives come from and where the Young Turks come from, et cetera. They're like, well, I don't get it. You don't seem to be in any of these camps. Or sometimes you're criticizing cabinet picks of Biden, and sometimes you're praising him. In this story, you told us that Bill Clinton did something terrible, but now you're praising Democrat Javier Becerra. So why? So let me decipher it for you, because our media in this country is so incredibly biased in different directions. Mainstream media biased in favor of corporate Democrats mainly, but also corporate Republicans. And the right wing completely in favor of Trump and Republicans. We actually care about policy. It's so sad that that's rare, and that like we have to explain that to you. Everyone should care about policy if they're in politics, but almost all of them care about what's my tribe, what's my status, etc. So the reality is some of Biden's picks have been bad to disastrous. This was a really good one. So we support him, not because we're on any team, but because Becerra has good policies and we'd love to have him head HHS.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's purely based on policies, as has been mentioned before. The Democratic Party really has two different parties within it, and we're on the left. And so I care about Medicare for all. I care about protecting Social Security from the cuts that Republicans and some Democrats have been fighting for. And this is also good news when you consider who the Biden campaign wanted to install in this position in the first place. Originally, it was going to be Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo, but she actually abruptly dropped out of consideration after it was revealed that she had made a deal with healthcare lobbyists to push for immunity for nursing home corporations during coronavirus. As we know, there's been some malpractice in some of these facilities, and many elderly people have died from the pandemic as a result of that. But I do want to give you a few other examples of what I've seen from Becerra that I like. So sticking to the topic of healthcare, he's actually sued healthcare companies or hospitals, I should say, that engaged in behavior that was pretty damaging to patients and consumers. His office sued Sutter Health, the largest hospital system in Northern California, over anti-competitive behavior. The behavior allegedly included all or nothing agreements in which insurers had to include all of Sutter's medical facilities within their networks if they wanted to contract with Sutter at all. Last December, the health system agreed to pay $575 million to settle the claims. It also prohibited engaging in several practices the Attorney General's office and others said the hospital system used to gain undue influence and hurt patients, including limiting what it can charge them for out-of-network services. And then when it comes to the topic of tax cuts, right? I feel like tax cuts tend to be like the one issue where Democrats might like kind of say they're against tax cuts for the wealthy, But Becerra talks the talk. Back in 2012, when the Obama administration was considering making the Bush era tax cuts permanent for the wealthy, Becerra actually went on the House floor and argued against that. And we have that example for you. Take a look.
When the Wall Street banking crisis of 2008 hit, causing the worst recession since the Great Depression, it was the middle class that took it on the chin. More than 8 million Americans lost their job through no fault of their own. And as millions of Americans were losing their jobs and their homes, the big banks received bailouts and CEOs continued to receive million-dollar payouts. While too many middle-class Americans are still out looking for work, this Congress is voting again to give over $160,000 a year in tax breaks to the richest 2% of Americans, while the average American will be lucky to get about 1/100th or maybe 1 or 2/100ths of that amount. Can anyone in this chamber blame the middle class for thinking the system is rigged against them? Mr. Speaker, we all admire financial success, but when we give away trillions in tax cuts that we cannot afford to those who need them the least, it's the middle class who has to make up the difference. To pay for these tax cuts, our Republican colleagues have voted to end Medicare and would force seniors to pay $6,400 more for their own care. On top of that, Republicans proposed changing Social Security, slashing its budget by over $800 million. It's an ideological agenda that chooses millionaires over the middle class.
So he has consistently fought against cutting funding for Social Security and Medicare, which is a good sign, especially for someone who's been nominated to head the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, two more things. One, if he has been able to navigate through the Democratic Party and achieve leadership positions while still having progressive policy positions, that means he's really smart. That's a very hard balancing act. Number two, corporate Democrats love identity politics. So they're like, oh, he's a Latino, that's what really matters. No, if he was a Latino that was pro-bankers, it wouldn't matter at all. You'd get no credit for it. Nobody would be like, oh my God, we finally got a Latino to back billionaires. That's not a thing that any average American cares about. But if you're a Latino who is actually fighting for the average guy, well, then they can go, oh, good, that's a guy I'm proud of. And then all of a sudden, that could make a difference. But it's the policies that matter the most. And so finally, the proof's gonna be in the pudding. So we see ahead of time the direction Becerra wants to go. On half that stuff, as we all know, certainly for Medicare for all, but even the easier things to do, Biden is not on his side. So if he's just appointing him so he can play identity politics, but then shut down every one of his proposals, well, then we're gonna take away the credit because that means it was just for show. But if Becerra is actually able to make progress on these issues, well, then credit to not just Becerra, but to Biden for appointing him. So that part we don't know yet. History will tell. So looking forward to see who wins that internal fight, because guys, it's not just about getting our policies passed, which is so important for it to actually help in your real lives. That's why passing bills is the most important thing in the world. But it's also important in winning future elections. If you don't ever deliver for Americans, guess what? They won't vote for you. And establishment Democrats haven't figured that out in decades. Maybe Becerra can help them figure it out.
So I want to do a breaking news story. We can. Okay, great. I just want to make sure we had enough time for it. So let's do it. This story just broke and it's a doozy. So law enforcement agents raided the home of a Florida data scientist who actually built the COVID-19 dashboard in the state of Florida. It was applauded. It was a great way of getting up-to-date data on the number of confirmed coronavirus cases and deaths. And so she actually ended up leaving her post and essentially working independently to spread accurate information about the spread of coronavirus in the state of Florida. And it looks like there's been some retaliation against her based on this preliminary reporting. So the state police, while brandishing firearms, raided the home of Rebecca Jones. She's the former Department of Health data scientist who built the state's much praised COVID-19 dashboard before actually getting fired. Okay, and she said that she was refusing to manipulate the data on behalf of, maybe the governor in Florida who has a vested interest in pretending like coronavirus is not a big deal. And so since she refused to manipulate that data, she says that she was fired. So in regard to the raid, a direct quote was that she was confronted by law enforcement agents who pointed a gun in my face. They pointed guns at my kids. And this is what she tweeted around 5 p.m. on Monday today. Jones also launched her own COVID-19 dashboard after getting fired from her position and used crowdsourcing to raise money to support it. And then as a result, it appears that there was some sort of retaliation against her. She says that after the raid happened, they took her technology, including her laptop. In the tweet, she says, there will be no update today regarding updated coronavirus numbers. At 8:30 a.m. this morning, state police came into my house and took all my hardware and tech. They were serving a warrant on my computer after DOH filed a complaint. They pointed a gun in my face. They pointed guns at my kids. Now, the law enforcement that showed up to do the raid said that they had been knocking on her door and they'd been calling her for 20 minutes and she was refusing to let them in. Finally, 20 minutes later, she did allow them to come in and they asked where her family was. She told them that they were upstairs. As her husband was walking downstairs, apparently these cops had their guns drawn on him. Luckily, no one got hurt, but this is absolutely shameful. And the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is arguing that she was essentially using the Department of Health messaging system, which is part of an emergency alert system to be used for emergencies only. And that was part of the reason why they engaged in this raid, which seems strange to say the least.
Okay, so there's a whole heap of stuff that's got to get sorted out here. First of all, I actually want to thank Marcus Otero, who's a viewer who told us through Super Chat while we were live on air that this story was happening, and we looked into it and we got to do it for you later in the program here. So thank you for being part of the show. Really appreciate it. So now in terms of the specifics here, number one, if this is about, they claim that she is misleading and presumably lying about numbers. Now that's going to be easy to prove who's right and who's wrong in court. I'm looking forward to that but I want to get to that in a second. Wait, lying about coronavirus is a crime? Then why hasn't Donald Trump been arrested 1,000 times over? It's gonna magically disappear. We've turned a corner. Inject yourself with bleach, and I can go on and on and on and on. That's not a crime. Otherwise, almost every Republican in Florida would have to be arrested, let alone nationally in Trump. Second of all, they say, well, she might be using a public database to do X, Y, or Z. Yeah, that's why it's a public database. All right, anyway, they're gonna sort that out in court. But can anyone justify pulling guns in this case?
Yeah.
Pulling guns? I mean, you guys are disagreeing on how many people died in coronavirus. You're gonna get the computers. We're gonna find out who's right and who's wrong in court. Why do you have to pull a gun? That doesn't make any sense at all. And so, and a kid, do you find out the kids are in the house? Like what, is she gonna get rid? Like it makes just no way. No way in any way, shape or form does that make sense. But we teach thuggery to our cops. It's the toxic police culture. Hey, you never know, man. They're typing thing on a keyboard. Protect yourself. Make sure you draw guns around the kids, okay? And then when they get to court, I'm really, really looking forward to seeing who's right, because we're not like the Republicans. We actually believe in the court system, and we believe in justice and the justice system overall. They'll go in front of judges and they'll hear them out. And I think the Republicans in Florida probably made a huge error here, because I don't know what's gonna happen in court, but given the track record that Republicans have on being honest on coronavirus, there's a 98% chance they're the ones who are lying. So when they go in and go, oh, Your Honor, she's got the right numbers on coronavirus and we didn't like it. Okay, then I would say, wait a minute, not only do you let her go, then why don't we arrest the person who ordered this obvious illegal arrest, if that's what it turns out to be? No, yeah. We get to do a legal arrest and draw guns on you, and there's nothing you can do. I don't agree. I think there is something we can do. I think the law should apply equally to everyone.
And special thanks to Yeetwood Mac on Twitch for sharing that story as well. All right, well that does it for me. But in the second hour, JR Jackson is kindly filling in for me because I have other things that I need to handle. So it's gonna be awesome. JR will come in and do not only the second hour of the show, but also the post game, which will be a proper post game, meaning I don't know what you guys are gonna talk about, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah, so a couple of things, guys. Obviously, you get the post game if you hit the join button below. If you're watching on YouTube, and that's at the essentials level and higher. Everybody else, tyt.com/join for that. But since we're back to 2 hours, we got a whole nother hour for you guys here for everybody. So stay right here. And in one of the stories in the next hour, I'm gonna rage about corporate Democrats. They've bungled the COVID relief in unimaginable ways. And by the way, the mainstream media is as close to actively lying as you can get. I'm gonna explain all that when we come back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.